Before he ruled Rome, he learned how power truly worked. In 100 BC, in the heart of the Roman Republic, a child was born into a world of politics, ambition, and danger. Julius Caesar. But Rome was not an empire yet. It was a battlefield of influence. Power wasn't inherited. It was fought for. Caesar was born into a noble family, but not a powerful one. His name carried prestige, but not dominance. And in Rome, that difference meant everything. From an early age, he understood something most did not. To rise in Rome, you had to outplay everyone. But his life nearly ended before it even began. During his youth, Rome fell into chaos. Civil war broke out between two powerful figures, Lucius Cornelius Sulla and his enemies. Caesar was on the wrong side. Because of his family connections, Sulla ordered him to divorce his wife or face death. Caesar refused. It was a dangerous decision. In Rome, defying a dictator wasn't bravery. It was suicide. He was forced to flee the city, stripped of his position, marked as an enemy. For a time, he had nothing. But he survived. And more importantly, he learned. He saw how power truly worked in Rome, not through honor, but through control. Years later, when Sulla died, Caesar returned. But he was no longer just a young noble. He was something else. Ambitious, calculated, patient. He began building his reputation, not just as a politician, but as a man the people would follow. He spoke with charisma, connected with the masses, understood what others ignored. While Rome's elite fought for power, Caesar built influence. And slowly, Rome began to notice. But he wasn't at the top yet, not even close. Because in Rome, the higher you rise, the more dangerous the fall.
In Rome, power was never taken alone. It was negotiated, manipulated, and controlled. As Julius Caesar returned to political life, he understood one crucial truth. He couldn't rise by strength alone. He needed allies. And so, he made one of the most important moves of his life. He formed a secret alliance with two of the most powerful men in Rome, Pompeo and Marco Licinio Crasso. Together, they created what would later be known as the First Triumvirate. It wasn't official, it wasn't legal, but it controlled Rome. Pompey had military glory, Crassus had immense wealth, and Caesar had ambition. Each man needed the other, and through this alliance, Caesar secured what he wanted most: power. He was elected consul, one of the highest positions in the Republic, but he didn't stop there. After his consulship, Caesar made a move that would change history. He took command of Gaul, a vast and dangerous region north of Rome. To many, it was exile. To Caesar, it was opportunity. Because in Rome, political power came from one thing: military success. And Gaul would give him exactly that. For years, Caesar led brutal campaigns across the region, battle after battle, victory after victory. He didn't just conquer Gaul, he transformed himself. From politician to legend. His army became loyal not to Rome, but to him. And that was dangerous. Because back in Rome, the balance of power was beginning to crack. Crassus died in the east, and the alliance that once controlled Rome began to fall apart. Pompey, once Caesar's ally, now stood against him. The Senate grew afraid. Too much power, too much influence, too much control. And so, they made a decision. One that would push Rome to the edge of collapse. They ordered Caesar to return to Rome without his army, to surrender his power, to become just another citizen. But Caesar had come too far. He had built too much. He had become too powerful to go back. And standing at the edge of a river that would change history forever, he made his choice.
There are moments in history where a single decision changes everything. For Julius Caesar, that moment came at the edge of a small river in northern Italy, the Rubicon. It wasn't wide, it wasn't impressive, but it was a boundary. By law, no general was allowed to cross it with an army. Doing so meant one thing: war against Rome itself. On the other side stood the Senate, and Pompey, now his enemy. Caesar had a choice: obey and lose everything, or cross and risk it all. There was no middle ground. And then he stepped forward. With his army behind him, Caesar crossed the Rubicon. According to legend, he spoke the words, "The die is cast." And just like that, Rome was at war with itself. The Senate panicked. Pompey, once the most powerful man in Rome, fled the city. They expected Caesar to hesitate, to negotiate, to slow down. He did none of that. He moved fast, decisive, relentless. City after city fell without resistance. Rome opened its gates to him, not as a conqueror, but as a leader. But the war wasn't over. Pompey had escaped east, gathering forces, preparing for a final confrontation, and it came at the Battle of Pharsalus. Pompey had the advantage: more men, more resources, more support. By all logic, he should have won. But Caesar didn't fight by logic. He fought with precision, strategy, control. Against all odds, he crushed Pompey's army. The battle was decisive. Pompey fled once again, this time to Egypt. But he would never return, because when he arrived, he was betrayed, murdered before he could even step onto land. And when Caesar followed, he was presented with Pompey's head, a gift, an attempt to gain favor. But Caesar didn't celebrate, because this wasn't victory. It was the end of something much bigger. The Republic was dying, and Caesar was now its master. Power changes men, but absolute power changes everything. After the defeat of his enemies, Julius Caesar returned to Rome not as a general, but as the most powerful man in the Republic. There were no more rivals, no more armies standing against him. Only one question remained: what would he do with that power? He moved quickly, reforming laws, redistributing wealth, expanding citizenship, reshaping Rome itself. To many, he was a hero. To others, he was becoming something far more dangerous: a king. And Rome did not tolerate kings. But Caesar didn't rule like a man afraid. He ruled like a man who believed he was untouchable. He accepted honors once considered unthinkable: statues in his image, his face on coins, a golden chair in the Senate, and then the title, dictator for life. It was no longer subtle. The Republic wasn't being led, it was being replaced. During this time, Caesar traveled to Egypt, where he met Cleopatra. Their alliance was political, but also personal. Cleopatra was intelligent, strategic, and ambitious, much like Caesar himself. Together, they strengthened their power. But back in Rome, something was growing: fear. The Senate watched closely. Men who once supported Caesar began to question him. Had he gone too far? Was this still a republic, or the beginning of a monarchy? Among them was a man Caesar trusted deeply: Marcus Junius Brutus, a friend, an ally, almost a son. But even loyalty has limits, because in Rome,
power was never secure. And the higher a man rose, the more shadows gathered around him. Whispers spread through the Senate. Plans were made in silence, not for power, but for something they believed was greater: the survival of Rome. And as Caesar stood at the peak of his power, he had no idea that his greatest threat was no longer outside. It was already beside him.
In Rome, betrayal was never a matter of if, only when. By 44 BC, Julius Caesar stood at the height of his power, dictator for life, reformer, conqueror, the most powerful man Rome had ever seen. But power like that creates fear, and fear creates enemies. Behind closed doors, a group of senators began to conspire. They called themselves liberators, men who believed they were saving the Republic. Among them were names Caesar trusted, including Marcus Junius Brutus. The plan was simple: kill Caesar, restore Rome. They chose their moment carefully. The Ides of March, March 15th, a meeting of the Senate. Caesar had been warned. Some say a prophet told him, "Beware the Ides of March." Others say he received letters, warnings of the plot. But he ignored them, whether it was confidence or fate. He walked into the Senate that day, unarmed, surrounded. At first, it seemed normal. Then, suddenly, one senator stepped forward, then another, and another. Blades were drawn. Caesar fought back, but there were too many. Dozens of men, dozens of strikes, and then he saw him, Brutus. In that moment, something changed. Not fear, not anger, something deeper: betrayal. According to legend, his final words were, "Et tu, Brute?" And just like that, Caesar fell, stabbed 23 times in the very place he once ruled. The conspirators believed they had saved Rome, but they were wrong. Because Caesar's death didn't restore the Republic, it destroyed it. Civil war followed, chaos returned, and from the ashes of the Republic, a new empire would rise. But Caesar's story didn't end there, because his name, his actions, his ambition changed the course of history forever. He redefined power. He reshaped Rome. He proved how far one man could go when he refused to accept limits. And even today, his name echoes through history.